Good evening, dear friends, and welcome to The Curious Case. I'm Davis, your host tonight. Where are you listening from? How's your evening so far? I always love reading your messages. Don't forget to subscribe new cozy mysteries every night. Now, pour your tea. Let's begin tonight's story. Street Mary Mead was wrapped in quiet celebration. The Christmas bazaar had turned the village green into a glittering patchwork of lanterns and laughter. Snow dusted the hedges. The air smelled of pine, warm bread, and wax. Inside Gossington Hall, the preparations were almost done. Lady Bantry supervised like a general before battle. Every table gleamed. Every ribbon was straightened twice. "Perfect," she said, though she always said that a few minutes too early. Miss Marple sat near the bay window, her needles clicking softly. A ball of red yarn rested at her feet like a patient cat. Outside she could see the carol singers rehearsing by the gate, voices rising, then falling, then laughter again. Lady Bantry turned from the fireplace. "Jane, you'll tell me if it looks too crowded, won't you? I never know when to stop adding holly." Miss Marple smiled. "My dear, no one in Street Mary Mead has ever accused you of moderation." "Flattery," Lady Bantry said, pretending to scold, but she blushed all the same. The servants moved briskly through the hall, balancing trays of jam tarts and fruitcake. The scent of orange peel mingled with the smoke of applewood logs. Each surface gleamed. Each candle stood perfectly still except one. It was on the memorial table near the piano. A single tall candle, pale as ivory, set in silver. It burned lower than the others. Its flame trembled strangely, as though resisting the stillness of the room. Mrs. Dodds, passing by with a tray, paused. "Odd, that one," she said. She reached out, blew gently. The flame dipped, then flared brighter. She frowned, blew again. The candle hissed softly but refused to die. Miss Marple looked up from her knitting. She watched the tiny dance of the light, sharp eyes narrowing. "Perhaps a draught?" she murmured. Lady Bantry followed her gaze. "No windows open, not with this cold." She moved closer, curiosity overtaking her sense of decorum. The hall grew strangely still. Even the servants slowed. The air felt heavier, somehow charged, like before a thunderstorm. Lady Bantry leaned in. "Stubborn little thing," she whispered. She cupped her hand and blew. Nothing. The flame only leaned sideways, as if mocking her. Miss Marple rose slowly, setting her knitting aside. Her eyes caught something on the tablecloth, small, dark specks clinging to the wax's edge. She touched one lightly with the tip of her finger. It left a faint, sticky mark, not wax. Something else. She looked at Lady Bantry. "My dear," she said quietly, "candles don't usually fight to stay alive." The clock struck 5, and the flame burned steady and strangely defiant. Something was wrong. Mrs. Dodds leaned closer to the candle. Her breath trembled the flame. It didn't move. It held perfectly still. She frowned, blew harder. The flame flickered, then burned brighter. "Faulty wick," she muttered, embarrassed. Mabel, the kitchen maid, stepped up next. "I'll do it, ma'am." She took a deep breath and blew. The flame bent backward, then hissed, and flared higher than before. A thin curl of dark smoke rose from the wax. A strange smell drifted out, sharp, acrid, chemical. Not beeswax, not pine, something harsher. Miss Marple's knitting stopped mid-stitch. She sniffed once, twice. "Unusual scent," she said quietly. Lady Bantry laughed nervously. "Oh, come now, Jane, it's a candle, not witchcraft." But the laughter faded fast, because the candle began to spit. Tiny sparks. A faint sizzling sound beneath the flame. Dr. Haydock, arriving late with snow, still on his coat, frowned. "That's not natural," he said. He moved closer. The smell thickened, stinging the eyes. He coughed. "That's resin, or turpentine." Miss Marple's gaze sharpened. "Resin burns too hot for candlelight." Her eyes dropped to the silver base. A thin trail of melted substance ran down its edge, thicker than wax, sticky like sap. The vicar's assistant, a young man named Colin, leaned in. "I'll take it out," he said quickly. He reached for the candle holder. Careful, Miss Marple warned. Too late. He lifted it, and the flame leapt sideways like a living thing. The wax burst. A hiss, a spark, then a pop, sharp as a gun crack. Colin stumbled back. The candle hit the floor. The flame went out with a gasp. For a second silence. Then Colin swayed. His knees buckled. Dr. Haydock caught him just before he hit the ground. Faint? Lady Bantry whispered. The doctor shook his head, examining the boy's wrist. No, something stronger. He sniffed the collar of Colin's coat. A faint, bitter scent clung to the fabric. Chloroform traces, he said grimly. But how? Miss Marple's expression tightened. She picked up the fallen candle with a handkerchief. The lower half had melted into a pool of yellow-white sludge. Embedded in it something metallic. She turned it gently. A ring. Silver. Still warm. Lady Bantry gasped. That's not mine. Miss Marple didn't answer. Her eyes traced the melted residue along the floor, a faint trail leading toward the side table. She followed it slowly, silently. The trail stopped beside the piano stool. There, another drop of wax, cool now, but tinted a faint reddish brown. She touched it lightly. Her fingers came away sticky again. Her voice was soft but steady. This candle was never meant to light the room, she said. It was meant to hide something in plain sight. The wind outside pressed against the ghost windows, and somewhere a bell began to toll. One note, then another. Miss Marple straightened, eyes on the darkened wick. Something, she whispered, has just begun. Doctor! Haydock crouched beside the fallen candle. Steam still rose from the melted mess on the carpet. He touched the edge of the residue with a glass rod, then lifted it toward the firelight. Not wax at all, he said. More like resin. The word hung in the air like smoke. Resin. Sticky, flammable, and dangerous. Lady Bantry frowned. Resin? But why on earth would anyone use that in a candle? Haydock scraped a little more from the silver base. It clung to his instrument like glue. Because it burns longer, hotter, and dirtier. He turned toward Miss Marple. Someone wanted this to melt slowly and leave no ordinary trace. Miss Marple's eyes glimmered in the firelight. Resin burns hotter, she murmured, and hides things. Her voice was calm, but her fingers moved quickly, testing, noticing. She touched a hardened edge of the melted pool, then used a knitting needle to lift something from inside. Something small, something metallic. Lady Bantry leaned forward. What is that? Miss Marple set it on the white linen cloth. The hall seemed to hold its breath. A ring, silver, dulled by heat, its edge blackened, but still intact. The firelight caught faint letters carved inside. E.B. Lady Bantry's hand went to her throat. Oh, heavens. Her voice shook. E.B., that could be Ernest Blythe. He used to come here years ago. Dr. Haydock glanced up sharply. Who is Ernest Blythe? A solicitor, she whispered. Or he was. He handled the church accounts after the war. Left suddenly. No one ever said why. Miss Marple studied the ring. It survived where nothing else should have. She tapped the metal lightly. Hidden in resin, concealed inside a candle. That suggests intent. Someone wanted it. Found but only after destruction. Lady Bantry blinked. You mean after it burned? Yes. After the wrong hands were too late to stop it. Haydock nodded slowly. Someone melted resin around this ring on purpose. A chemical shell. Ingenious if unpleasant. He held the burned remnant under his nose. The smell sharp, almost medicinal. Could be turpentine or shellac. Both used for sealing things. Miss Marple's gaze moved to the other candles on the table. Each one looked identical. Smooth, pale, innocent. Let's test them, she said. Haydock obliged. He lifted one, then another, weighing them in his hand. The third was heavier. Too heavy for wax. He placed it on the silver tray and struck a match. The wick caught instantly, but the flame wobbled, sputtering with faint green sparks. Lady Bantry stepped back. Good gracious, it's the same. Miss Marple didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the rising smoke, thicker, darker now. "This isn't about fire," she said quietly. "It's about what the fire was meant to hide." Dr. Haydock turned toward her. "Hide what exactly?" Miss Marple's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped to a whisper, steady, deliberate. "Proof," she said. "Or guilt." The flame on the tray bent suddenly, flaring once more in defiance, as if it still had something left to burn. The church smelled of damp stone and smoke. The bazaar lights flickered weakly through the stained glass. Whispers filled the air, low, uneasy, spreading fast. Then the heavy oak door swung open, and Inspector Slack stepped in. He looked annoyed before anyone spoke, his hat still dusted with snow, his eyes sweeping the hall like searchlights. "All right," he barked. "Who's been playing with matches?" No one answered. Only the faint creak of the pews replied. Miss Marple sat quietly in the corner seat, her knitting in her lap, her eyes following every motion of the inspector's hands. "The vestry," Lady Bantry said quickly. "It's locked. From the inside." Slack turned sharply. "Locked? And you're all standing here? Doctor?" Haydock gestured to the door. "Chair jammed under the handle. We tried forcing it. No luck." Slack grunted. He moved forward, examining the door frame. Old hinges. Heavy wood. He pressed his shoulder against it. The chair gave way with a sharp crack. The door burst open. The smell hit them first, burnt resin, mixed with something faintly sweet and metallic. Miss Marple rose slowly, her shawl trailing behind her. Slack stepped inside. His torch beam cut through the dimness. "Empty," he said, but his tone didn't sound satisfied. The small room looked untouched, robes hanging neatly, hymnals stacked in order, everything as it should be, except the floor. There, beneath the small wooden table, lay scattered drippings of candle wax, some pale yellow, some dark and greasy, and beside them, a torn scrap of crimson ribbon. Slack crouched down. He picked up the ribbon piece between two fingers, frayed edges, stiffened by melted resin. "Could be from a woman's bonnet," he muttered. "Could be from the altar decoration." "Doctor," Haydock suggested. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the tall candlestand near the wall. One candle was shorter than the rest, its base scorched, the brass beneath it blackened and warped. "Not church wax," she murmured. Her fingers brushed the soot on the rim, then softly. "Someone burned a second candle here. Not for prayer, for purpose." Slack straightened, frowning. "Purpose, eh? More likely mischief. Someone locked this place and set a fire." He sniffed the air again. Resin again. Same smell. He pocketed the ribbon, eyes narrowing. "Sabotage," he said flatly. Miss Marple shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "Or message." Slack turned. "Message? What kind of message?" She didn't answer. Her eyes were on the wall now, where faint streaks of soot ran upward, forming the outline of a cross, and something else beside it. She stepped closer. Her gloved hand traced the faint shape in the darkened plaster. Not a cross at all. A letter. "B," she breathed, her expression unreadable. Lady Bantry's voice broke the silence. "E. B. Again?" Miss Marple looked at her, eyes sharp now. "Perhaps," she said softly, "but someone wants to make sure we remember it." The wind moaned through the chapel tower, and somewhere above them a single bell gave one hollow, echoing ring. The drawing room was warm, but the maid sitting near the fire was not. Lily Veen's hands trembled in her lap. Her apron was crumpled, and her eyes were red from crying. Lady Bantry stood near the hearth, arms folded. "Come now, Lily," she said gently. "No one's angry. Just tell us what you saw." The girl swallowed hard. Her gaze flicked between the faces around her. Miss Marple, calm but watchful. Inspector Slack, impatient and looming like a shadow. "I didn't mean to see anything," Lily whispered. "It wasn't my business. I was only dusting." "Dusting what?" Slack snapped. "The table. The one by the piano." Miss Marple leaned forward slightly. "The same table where the candle stood." Lily nodded, eyes down, her fingers twisted in her apron. "I thought the wax looked strange." It had dripped all the way down to the floor. And someone had moved the flowers. They weren't like that before. Slack grunted. Flowers. Useless detail. Miss Marple ignored him. What time was this, my dear? Just after dawn. Maybe 6. The snow hadn't started yet. And you were alone? Lily hesitated. Her breathing quickened. Well, I thought I was. Then I saw. She broke off. Slack's tone hardened. Saw what? The girl's lips trembled. Someone by the table. A shape. All grey, from head to toe. I thought it was Lady Bantry at first, but it wasn't. She wouldn't stand that still. Lady Bantry frowned. What do you mean, still? Like a statue, facing the candle. I called out, but the person didn't turn. Miss Marple's voice was soft. Someone in grey, you said? Lily nodded again, tears gathering. Yes, ma'am. Grey coat, grey scarf. And something on their hands. Looked like gloves. Slack scribbled a note. Gloves. Fine. Could be anyone. He turned to Lady Bantry. Any visitor last night? None. Just the household and the vicar's assistant. Miss Marple rose quietly. She moved closer to Lily. Her tone changed gentle, but deliberate. When you say grey, my dear, do you mean grey wool? The girl blinked. Or, Miss Marple continued softly, grey ash? The words hit like a match. Lily gasped. Her hand went to her mouth. Her eyes filled instantly. She shook her head, but the tears came anyway. Lady Bantry stepped forward. What is it, child? Speak. Lily broke. I swept it up, she sobbed. I didn't know it was wrong. I thought it was just dirt just from the fire. Slack's voice thundered. Swept what up? Lily's answer came out in pieces. Something near the piano. Grey dust. Fine as powder. And under it, a mark. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. What kind of mark? The girl looked up, terrified. A footprint, ma'am, she whispered. Only half of one. As if someone had stepped in ashes, and then vanished. The room fell silent. The only sound was the hiss of the fire and the faint crackle of burning pine. Miss Marple turned toward the doorway. Her voice was calm, almost cold. Then, she said, our visitor in grey is not a ghost. She's still walking somewhere in this house. The morning brought no peace. By 9 o'clock, the vicarage was buzzing again. Whispers moved through the hallway like smoke. Something else had vanished. The church treasurer, Mr. Giles Harcourt, arrived in a panic, his spectacles fogged, his coat half-buttoned. He clutched his briefcase like a shield. Miss Marple, Lady Bantry, he cried. It's gone, completely gone. Dr. Haydock looked up from the hearth. What's gone now? The ledger, the entire church account book. He spread his trembling hands. Every page, every record vanished overnight. Inspector Slack's eyebrows shot up. Gone, eh? And what time did you last see it? Last evening. I left it locked in the vestry cabinet, after the bazaar. I never imagined anyone. He stopped, catching his breath. Someone forced it. I can smell the chemicals still. They followed him into the small vestry. The air was sharp, bitter, sour, unnatural, turpentine, strong enough to sting the eyes. Slack covered his nose. Good Lord. Smells like a painter's shed. Miss Marple stepped inside, her eyes sweeping the room. The wooden table was marked with pale rings of moisture. She touched the edge. Sticky. She looked up. The surface varnish has softened. Turpentine dissolves it. Whoever came here didn't care about polish. They cared about removal. Lady Bantry frowned. Removal of what? The book? Perhaps, Miss Marple said softly. Or perhaps something inside it. Mr. Harcourt wrung his hands. The ledger held old entries. Donations, invoices, signatures, nothing valuable except to an accountant. Slack gave a dry laugh. Oh, there's always something valuable when paper disappears. Miss Marple turned toward the small window above the altar. It was half open. Cold air drifted through, carrying faint flakes of ash. She brushed her hand across the sill. Grey dust. Again, the pattern repeated. Fire, resin, ash, all pointing toward concealment. Dr. Haydock inspected the cabinet lock, forced cleanly with a blade. No brute strength precision. Miss Marple nodded slightly. A careful hand. Someone practiced. Slack crossed his arms. So, let me guess. Not the maid. Not the vicar. One of your ghosts again, eh, Miss Marple? She didn't smile. Ghosts don't carry ledgers out of locked rooms, Inspector. Her tone made him pause. She turned back to the table, studying the streaks of residue. The smell was stronger here, near the corner. She took a clean handkerchief and pressed it lightly to the surface. A faint brown stain bled into the cloth. She lifted it to her nose. Not varnish, not ink. Oil. Lamp oil, she murmured, her voice barely audible. Used to make a quick fire burn slow. Someone tried to burn the book, then changed their mind. Lady Bantry gasped. But why stop halfway? Miss Marple's eyes darkened. Because something inside it was already gone. Slack's pen froze in midair. Gone before the fire? Yes. She turned toward him slowly, which means the fire was not the crime. It was the cover. The inspector blinked, the words sinking in. Miss Marple looked once more at the window, where the last flake of ash drifted toward the snow. It seems, she whispered, our thief is cleaning up very carefully. The Reverend Clement stood near the vestry window, his breath clouding faintly in the cold air. He hadn't sat down since dawn. His hands clutched his prayer book too tightly for comfort. Inspector Slack closed his notebook. Well, Reverend, seems your church has more smoke than sermon this morning. Clement gave a weary smile. Please, Inspector. This is no laughing matter. Miss Marple watched him quietly from a pew, her eyes gentle, her mind sharp as glass. You seem troubled, Mr. Clement, she said softly. Is it only the fire or something older than that? He hesitated. A long pause. Then his shoulders dropped. There is something, he admitted. His voice cracked slightly. Something I should have said long ago. Lady Bantry exchanged a worried glance with Dr. Haydock. Slack leaned forward. Go on, sir. The Reverend's gaze drifted toward the blackened table. The ledger that's missing, he began, was not an ordinary account book. It contained a record of every church donation back to the Great War. And? Slack prompted. And, the Reverend continued slowly, some of those donations were irregular. Miss Marple folded her hands. Irregular? He nodded. Money that came from unnamed benefactors. Amounts that didn't match the envelopes. Sums that were quietly adjusted. Lady Bantry's hand went to her chest. Adjusted? Clement closed his eyes. Sometimes the parish funds fell short. Sometimes the vicar before me made small changes. I followed his practice. Just to keep the accounts balanced. Small errors, I thought. Nothing harmful. Slack frowned. How small, Reverend? Pounds, shillings, pennies. Never large enough to notice until someone looked too closely. Miss Marple rose slowly. She stepped toward him. Her expression calm, but her tone cut like a blade. Small errors, she said softly, have a way of catching fire. The Reverend blinked, startled. I didn't mean deceit, Miss Marple. Only preservation. But someone else, she said, saw it differently. Slack folded his arms. You think that's why the ledger vanished? To hide these little preservations? Miss Marple nodded. Or to use them. A record of mismanaged funds is as dangerous as a loaded pistol. The Reverend turned pale. You mean blackmail? Dr. Haydock exhaled. Possible. The thief knew exactly what to take. They didn't steal money. They stole proof. Miss Marple's gaze wandered to the candlestand again. The resin stains. The ashes. The initials carved into silver. Proof, she murmured, and guilt both burn well. Slack looked around. Who else knew about these irregularities? Clement hesitated. His lips pressed together. Then, only one. Ernest Blythe. The name dropped like a stone into water. Lady Bantry gasped. The man from the ring. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed faintly. Yes, The initials return. Slack's voice hardened. Where is this Blythe now? The Reverend's voice dropped to a whisper. He left years ago, but last week he swallowed. I received a letter. No name, no address. Just a note saying, the accounts must be balanced. Miss Marple's expression froze. Balanced, she repeated. That's not a warning, Reverend. That's a promise. The evening train hissed into Street Mary Mead Station. Steam curled under the platform lights, pale and ghostly. A single man stepped off, carrying a worn brown case. He was thin, nervous, dressed too formally for the village. Mr. Ernest Blythe, he said when the porter asked. Here on parish business. The name spread through the village faster than rumour. By supper-time, Miss Marple already knew. She was waiting when he arrived at Gossington Hall. Lady Bantry received him first. Mr. Blythe, isn't it? How long since you've seen our little village? He smiled politely. Some years, Lady Bantry. I doubt anyone remembers me now. But Miss Marple remembered. Her eyes stayed fixed on him while he warmed his hands near the fire. Insurance clerk now, I hear? She asked lightly. Yes, he said quickly. Moved to London after the war. I prefer numbers to people these days. Slack stood in the corner, arms crossed. He didn't blink once. Convenient work, Miss Marple said. Numbers don't talk back, but ledgers do. The man froze, just slightly, then smiled again too quickly. I came to check on an old policy, he said. Church records, routine verification. Slack stepped forward. Routine verification, is it? Then perhaps you can explain why your initials are on a ring that nearly burned the vestry to ash. Blythe's eyes flickered. I don't know what you mean. Miss Marple opened a small white cloth on the table. Inside, the ring gleamed faintly in the lamplight. Silver, scorched. E.B. carved inside. This one, she said simply. The man stared. His breath caught. Then he dropped his gloves. They hit the floor with a soft thud. 2 black leather gloves, the fingers stained faintly with soot. Slack's eyes narrowed. Been polishing chimneys, have we? No, Blythe said quickly. His voice cracked. I've just come from London. The soot must be from the train. Miss Marple's tone was mild. Then why, she said gently, does it smell like turpentine? He flinched. Slack stepped closer. Start talking, Blythe. Blythe's mouth moved, but no sound came. Finally, a whisper. I didn't take it. Take what? Miss Marple asked softly. The ledger, he said. His eyes darted to the door. Someone got there first. Lady Bantry gasped. Then you knew it was missing. He hesitated, defeated. I came to recover it, he said. I thought it might still be here. Slack snorted. And what would an insurance clerk want with church accounts? Blythe's voice lowered. There were receipts, from before the war, payments that were never meant to be seen again. Miss Marple's eyes didn't move from his face. And now? He swallowed hard. Now someone's making sure they stay buried. She leaned forward slightly. Her tone was almost kind. Buried where, Mr. Blythe? He met her eyes, pale and trembling. In fire, he whispered, just like before. The clock on the mantel struck 8, and somewhere outside, another candle flickered to life. It was Inspector Slack who spotted it first. Outside the vestry door, under the pale morning light, a mark, then another, faint, black, uneven, footprints. He crouched down, tracing them with a matchstick. Boots, he muttered. Size 9, maybe 10. Fresh enough. Miss Marple joined him silently. Her shawl brushed the cold stone floor. Coal dust, she asked. Slack rubbed the soot between his fingers. Not from a hearth. Too oily. Mixed with resin again. The prince led away from the vestry, across the corridor, through the back passage toward the rectory kitchen. They followed the trail carefully, each step deliberate. The air grew colder as they moved. Every few feet another smudge, another print. Then suddenly, nothing. The trail stopped beneath the stove. Slack knelt. The tiles were darkened by ash. He pulled open the iron grate. A burst of grey dust rose into the air. "Someone's been burning again," he said. "Inside the stove ashes. Old paper, half-charred, and among it, something white and curled." Slack fished it out with tongs and laid it on the counter. A half-burned envelope. Miss Marple leaned in. Her eyes scanned the edge where fire had licked the paper. Only one line remained visible, written in neat black ink. "Proof enclosed. Handle before Friday." Slack exhaled slowly. "Well," he said, "today's Friday." The clock in the hallway struck 3. The sound echoed through the house like a warning. Lady Bantry crossed herself. "Proof of what?" Slack shrugged. "Could be anything. Could be nothing." Someone panicked. Miss Marple shook her head. "Not panic," she said quietly. "Timing." She touched the charred edge of the letter. Whoever wrote this wanted something delivered or destroyed before today, and they nearly succeeded. Dr. Haydock picked up a fragment from the ashes. The corner of a church seal, half melted, half intact. "Official stationery," he said. "Clement's Parish." Slack looked grim. So our Reverend's letter might have had a deadline. Miss Marple said nothing. Her mind was turning, quietly, like clockwork. She turned back to the footprints. They stopped under the stove. But one faint print, barely visible, led backward, toward the side door. A different tread, narrower, lighter, not the same boots. She crouched low, studying it. The faint outline shimmered in the grey powder. A single mark, high-heeled. She stood slowly, her face unreadable. "A lady's shoe," she murmured. Slack blinked. "You're saying a woman burned this letter?" Miss Marple looked at the paper again. "Perhaps," she said softly, "or perhaps someone wanted it to look like she did." She folded the half-burned note carefully into her handkerchief. "Either way," she said, "whatever was inside this envelope." She paused. Was meant to vanish before sunset. Snow had begun to fall again. Thin flakes drifted through the quiet village, settling on rooftops like dust. The church bell tolled once distant, hollow as Miss Marple and Inspector Slack crossed the square. The little general shop stood at the corner, its window fogged with warmth and cinnamon. Inside, Mrs. Dodds was arranging tins on a shelf when the bell above the door jingled. She turned, smiling until she saw the inspector's face. "Morning, Mrs. Dodds," Slack said. Her smile faded. "Oh, Inspector, more trouble, I suppose." "Just questions," Miss Marple said kindly. Her tone always softened the room. "This concerns the candles for the church bazaar." Mrs. Dodds blinked. "The tall white ones? I remember. Odd order that was." Slack leaned forward. "Odd how?" Mrs. Dodds wiped her hands on her apron. "They were made to measure. Extra resin in the blend, the sort used for sealing crates or preserving labels. Never had that request before." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. "Who placed the order?" The shopkeeper hesitated. "Well, it wasn't the vicar, nor Lady Bantry. Came from a woman I didn't know. Paid in cash." Slack frowned. "Describe her." Mrs. Dodds thought for a moment. "Plain coat, gloves, spoke properly. Said she was buying them on behalf of a lady's companion." The words hung there. The fire in the shop crackled softly. Miss Marple tilted her head. "Did she give a name?" "No, ma'am. Just said she was short on time and wanted them delivered that same afternoon." Lady Bantry, standing behind them, went pale. "Companion? But my companion's been ill all week. She's barely left her room." Mrs. Dodds frowned. "Well, whoever she sent looked lively enough." Slack flipped open his notebook. "When was this?" "Monday morning." "I remember because the snow had just started." Miss Marple turned toward the window. Outside, the village looked perfectly peaceful, but she saw the gaps in the stillness. The pattern that didn't fit. "Monday morning," she repeated softly. "That was 2 days before the candle was lit." Slack nodded, meaning someone planned this. Ordered the resin candles in advance. Mrs. Dodds crossed her arms. "Can't see why anyone would go through all that trouble just to burn a church table." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Perhaps they weren't trying to burn a table, Mrs. Dodds. Perhaps they were burning evidence." The shopkeeper's eyes widened. "Evidence?" Miss Marple turned back to Lady Bantry. "Your companion, my dear. How long did she say she'd been ill?" "Since Sunday night," Lady Bantry said. "She asked to be left alone. Headache, she said." Miss Marple's voice softened. "Then she had just enough strength, it seems, to place a very clever order." Slack raised an eyebrow. "You think she's behind it?" Miss Marple didn't answer. Her gaze followed the slow fall of snow outside the window. Then, almost to herself, she murmured, "No, not behind. Ahead." Slack frowned. "Ahead of what?" Miss Marple looked at him, eyes cold and certain. "Of discovery." Evening had fallen over Gossington Hall. The snow outside had thickened into silence. Only the ticking clock disturbed the stillness. Miss Marple sat alone in the study. Lady Bantry had gone to rest, pale and shaken. The house was too quiet, too tidy, and that, she thought, was always suspicious. Her eyes roamed across the writing desk, polished, immaculate, but different. The surface gleamed as if freshly waxed. Even the smell was off, faint turpentine, faint smoke. She ran a gloved hand along the edge. Her fingers caught on a small groove beneath the silver tray, almost invisible. She paused, lifted the tray gently, and there it was, a drawer, thin, hidden, the wood too bright, recently polished. "Interesting," she murmured. She pressed lightly. The panel clicked open. Inside lay a small ledger, leather-bound, scorched at the corners, the missing church accounts. Her heartbeat quickened. She turned the pages slowly. Some were blank, scrubbed clean by chemical wash. Others still legible figures, initials, dates. The last line was written in a trembling hand. "Final balance, to E. Blythe." Miss Marple exhaled softly. "So that's what you wanted back," she whispered. She set the ledger aside. Her gaze fell on the second object inside the drawer, a candle, unlit, pale ivory, identical to the one that had refused to die. Same pattern, same faint scent of resin. Her hand hovered over it, cautious. She didn't touch the wick, only looked at it under the lamplight. A faint shimmer on the surface, not wax reflection, but oil, coated deliberately. She spoke aloud, though no one was there. Someone intended this one to burn next. From the doorway, a voice startled her. "You found it, then?" She turned. Lady Bantry stood there, robe wrapped tight, her expression uneasy. "Why was it hidden in your desk?" Miss Marple asked calmly. Lady Bantry's eyes flicked toward the candle. "I don't know. I never saw that before." "Someone polished this drawer recently," Miss Marple said, "and they used turpentine. The same smell we found in the vestry." Slack entered just then, his boots echoing on the floorboards. "Well, well, the lost ledger turns up under your roof, Lady Bantry." She bristled. "Don't be absurd." Miss Marple lifted the ledger carefully. "Not absurd," she said softly. "Purposeful." She nodded toward the candle. "Someone placed this here after the vestry fire. The question is, why hide one that hasn't burned yet?" Slack frowned. "To light it later?" Miss Marple's gaze didn't move from the candle. Her voice was steady, almost cold. "No, Inspector. Not to light it." Slack stared. "Then what for?" She closed the drawer slowly. "To wait," she said. Her tone dropped to a whisper. "For the next Friday." Miss Marple spread her notes across the dining table. Loose pages, scrawled numbers, names half finished, circled twice. She worked in silence. The fire beside her flickered low, casting lines of light across the ink. 2 candles, 2 initials, 2 payments. Patterns never lied. She aligned the slips of paper in order: the ledger entry, the ring, the torn ribbon, and the burned envelope from the stove. Slack leaned against the mantel, watching her with crossed arms. "Well, Miss Marple, you've got the floor covered in soot, and my patience nearly gone. Tell me what ties all this nonsense together." She didn't look up. Instead, she placed 2 candles side by side, one melted, one unlit. "The fires," she said quietly, "weren't accidents." Slack frowned. "Oh, don't tell me this again. I know what a bad candle looks like." "Not bad," she said softly. Deliberate. Dr. Haydock, seated opposite, leaned forward. Deliberate how? Miss Marple tapped her pen twice on the page. Each fire started where a name was meant to disappear. One in the ledger, one in the vestry. The heat wasn't random. It was targeted. Slack snorted. Targeted fire? You're saying someone planned which spot would burn. She looked at him at last. Every stolen shilling, she said, burned to silence guilt. The room went quiet. Even the ticking clock seemed to stop. Lady Bantry whispered, "Signatures? Of a thief?" Miss Marple nodded. "Exactly. Every theft marked by fire. Every cover-up disguised as devotion. Each candle burned not for prayer, but for proof." Slack paced slowly. "So, our arsonist leaves a signature flame for guilt, ash for memory. All poetic nonsense, if you ask me." "Not poetry, Inspector," she replied. "Arithmetic." She slid the ledger toward him. "Look here. Each irregular entry is dated on a Friday. Each fire occurred the same week. Someone was balancing their books in flame." Haydock exhaled, half admiration, half dread. "So the resin, the turpentine, that wasn't to destroy. It was to control the burn." Miss Marple nodded. "Control and delay. Enough time for everyone to see it, to panic, and to assume divine irony instead of human hands." Slack's tone hardened. "So it's a message. Every fire means, I know." "Or worse," Miss Marple said. "I'm still watching." Lady Bantry's teacup rattled against the saucer. Her voice came thin and dry. "But who would do such a thing?" Miss Marple turned back to the papers. The initials caught her eye again, E.B. Then, faintly below one of the Friday notes, another set of initials, H.C. Her breath caught. She looked up sharply. "Inspector," she said quietly. "Fetch the Reverend's assistant. Now." Slack frowned. "Colin?" "Yes," she said, her gaze fixed on the burning logs, the flames dancing like coded letters. "Because if I'm right." She paused. "He's already lit the next one." The air in Gossington Hall had gone still, too still. Miss Marple stood by the open drawer, her hand resting lightly on the edge. Beside her, the unlit candle gleamed faintly in the lamplight, pale, perfect, patient. Slack shifted his weight, uneasy. Lady Bantry hovered near the door, her face pale, her voice barely steady. "I don't understand, Jane. Who would put that thing in my desk?" Before Miss Marple could answer, the door opened. A woman stepped inside, graceful, composed, a shawl draped neatly across her shoulders. Lady Bantry's companion, Miss Edna Cray. The ill companion. She smiled faintly at the sight of the group. "Well, this is unexpected. I hope I'm not intruding." Miss Marple turned slowly. Her eyes dropped to Edna's gloves. Light-colored kid leather, but smudged faintly with black. "Feeling better, Miss Cray?" she asked kindly. Edna blinked. "Oh, yes. A little rest did wonders." Slack's tone was sharp. "Rest, was it? In town, perhaps? Buying candles?" The woman stiffened. "I beg your pardon." Miss Marple stepped closer. "The candles for the church," she said softly. "They were ordered by someone claiming to be a lady's companion. Paid for in cash. Delivered on Monday morning." Edna's smile faltered. Her gloved hands gripped the edge of her shawl. "You can't possibly mean—" "Oh, but we can," Miss Marple said gently. She nodded toward the writing desk. "Because this is where the trail ends." Lady Bantry's voice trembled. "Edna, please tell me you had nothing to do with this." Edna said nothing. Her eyes darted toward the half-open drawer. Inside, the silver-trimmed candle glowed softly under the lamplight. She froze, just for a heartbeat. Slack saw it. So did Miss Marple. "The wax didn't melt by itself," Miss Marple said. Her voice was low, even. "It remembered the hands that made it." Edna turned sharply. "That's absurd." "Is it?" Miss Marple asked. "Because the resin used in those candles isn't sold in this village. It's a sealing compound for delicate work, the kind you'd use to fix old documents." Dr. Haydock's brow furrowed. "Documents like a ledger?" Miss Marple nodded. or to seal the corner of a page before burning it. Edna's breath hitched. She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper. I don't know what you're implying. Slack stepped closer. Then why, he said, does your glove smell like turpentine? She backed away, trembling now. Her heel hit the edge of the rug. The candle rolled from the drawer and clattered onto the floor. Everyone froze. It didn't break. It didn't crack. It just lay there, silent, like it was waiting. Miss Marple looked down at it. Her tone softened, but her words carried weight. You see, Miss Cray, she said, truth always melts last. Edna's eyes filled with panic, and before anyone could stop her, she turned and ran. The confession came slowly, not shouted, not forced, just peeled out, layer by layer like wax melting from a flame. Miss Cray sat at the writing desk. Her gloves were gone now. Her hands trembled in her lap. Slack stood nearby, notebook open, jaw tight with restrained victory. Doctor. Haydock leaned against the mantel, silent. Lady Bantry hovered near the door, her face pale with disbelief. Miss Marple sat opposite, quiet as ever, eyes steady kind, but cutting through every lie before it landed. Start at the beginning, she said softly. No one's rushing you. Edna Cray swallowed hard. Her voice came out dry, brittle. It began last year. The Reverend's accounts were already in chaos. Mr. Harcourt, the treasurer, asked me to copy the old ledgers. Just neat work, he said. But I noticed the numbers didn't match. Slack's pen scratched across the page. How much didn't match? Enough, she whispered. Donations missing. Money unrecorded. And all of it tied to Ernest Blythe. Lady Bantry gasped. Blythe? Again? Edna nodded slowly. He visited the vicarage often back then, always after dark, always with another envelope. Miss Marple's tone was gentle. You thought you'd found their secret. I had, Edna said quickly, but I wasn't part of it. Not at first. Then I realized what that ledger meant. It could ruin them all. Or save me. Slack's voice was sharp. So you blackmailed him. Her lips trembled. Not blackmail. Compensation. I'd been underpaid for years. Forgotten. Invisible. Why should the men profit while I starved beside them? Dr. Haydock muttered. So you took your share. Edna's eyes flashed. I forged one signature. Just one. Harcourt's name on the last page. Enough to show balance. Enough to make it look proper. Miss Marple nodded slowly. And when the discrepancy came to light, he panicked, Edna said. Blythe sent me letters, warning me to destroy everything. He said if the ledger surfaced, both of us were finished. So I did what I thought was clever. Her voice cracked now, half laughter, half despair. I hid the ledger, the forged page, the ring, his ring, everything inside candles. The resin kept it sealed. The church was full of candles. No one would suspect a thing. Lady Bantry stared, horrified. You hid evidence in sacred candles? Edna's eyes welled with tears. I thought I could control it. If he came back, I'd melt the proof. If he stayed away, it was safe forever. Miss Marple's tone darkened. But he came back. Edna nodded. Last Friday. He wanted his share. He'd found out the Reverend was being questioned. He said the ledger had to burn that night. I told him it was hidden in the vestry. Slack crossed his arms. Let me guess. You lit the candle yourself. Edna's breath hitched. Yes, he was supposed to wait. I told him to leave before the wax melted, but he touched it trying to pull the ring free. She closed her eyes. The resin burned hotter than I knew. The fumes, it must have hit him instantly. He fell. I panicked. The room fell into silence. Only the wind tapped faintly at the window. Miss Marple spoke softly. So you locked the door? Yes, Edna whispered. I thought if the fire took it all, no one would know. But the candle didn't burn clean. The resin left stains, and the ring refused to die. Slack's jaw tightened. You could have called for help. She looked at him, broken. And say what? That I'd killed a man with a prayer candle? Miss Marple folded her hands. Not murder, Miss Cray, but concealment and fear. Edna looked down at her blackened fingertips. The voice that followed was almost calm. I didn't mean to kill him. I only wanted the past to melt away. Miss Marple's eyes softened. The past never melts, my dear. It hardens, like resin. No one spoke after that. Slack closed his notebook. Dr. Haydock stepped forward quietly. Lady Bantry turned away, tears in her eyes. Miss Marple rose slowly, the quiet authority of truth settling over the room. She glanced once at the second candle, still unlit, still waiting. Then, softly, she said, "Take her gently, Inspector. This one burned herself long before the flame was lit." Slack nodded. He led Edna toward the door. She didn't resist. As the hall swallowed their footsteps, the last candle on the desk flickered faintly, though no match had touched it. Miss Marple watched it for a long, thoughtful moment, then whispered to herself, "Fire remembers." By evening, the snow had swallowed the village, soft, white, endless street. Mary Mead lay still again, as if the day's chaos had been a fever dream. The bazaar tents were gone. The lanterns dimmed. Only the faint scent of pine and wax lingered in the air. Inside Gossington Hall, the drawing-room glowed gently with firelight. No police, no questions, no lies left to hide behind. Lady Bantry sat by the hearth, silent, turning her teacup slowly in her hands. Across from her, Miss Marple watched the last flame in the great tremble. It burned low, softly, like a secret almost ready to die. Dr. Haydock poured tea for them both. "Strange business," he said. His voice was low, reflective. "Even after all this, I can't quite hate the woman. Foolish, yes, but not wicked." Miss Marple nodded slightly. "No one begins wicked, Doctor. They only choose a smaller truth once too often and find themselves buried in it." Lady Bantry looked up. "Jane, do you think she ever meant to kill him?" Miss Marple stirred her tea slowly. "I think she meant to survive him. That's always the beginning of tragedy, when one believes they can manage the fire without getting burned." Silence again, the kind that sits between friends who've seen something they can't unsee. The wind sighed against the windows. Somewhere in the distance, the church bell rang 8 times. 8 solemn strokes marking the end of a long day, and perhaps something more. Lady Bantry broke the quiet. "The Reverend will recover, I hope. Poor man, he looked so hollow." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "He will. He's learned that sins in ink are easier to confess than sins in silence." Haydock chuckled softly. "You always turn these horrors into sermons, Jane." She looked at him, eyes kind. "Someone must. Otherwise they happen again." He nodded, sipping his tea. Outside, the snow thickened, covering every footprint, every trace of the day. Even the soot by the church door would soon vanish. Miss Marple rose and crossed to the mantelpiece. Her eyes lingered on the unlit candle resting there, the last of the resin pair. It looked ordinary now, harmless even. She touched it gently with one gloved hand. Cold, smooth, unburned. "Strange, isn't it?" she murmured. "How easily evil hides inside what seems useful." Lady Bantry shivered. "I'll never light another candle without thinking of that." Miss Marple smiled. "Oh, my dear, that's exactly what you should do. Keep lighting them. Just remember to look at what burns away." She returned to her chair, settling back as the fire sank lower. The logs cracked quietly, sending a shower of sparks into the dim air. "In every small deceit," she said softly, "there hides a spark that longs to burn." No one answered. The words seemed to settle in the room like dust, warm at first, then heavy with meaning. Lady Bantry blinked, half whispering, "You always make it sound so simple, Jane." "It is simple," Miss Marple replied gently, "but it is never easy." Outside, the snow drifted against the glass. Soft, steady, endless. The world was covering itself as if to forget. Miss Marple looked toward the window, watching the flakes gather in quiet rhythm. Her expression was calm, but her eyes sharp, alive, were elsewhere. "Evil doesn't disappear with arrest, you know," she said quietly. "It waits, like ash under snow. Lady Bantry followed her gaze. "What do you mean?" Miss Marple didn't reply. She reached forward, poked at the fire once, and a small flame leapt up from the embers, a sudden flicker of orange light. It burned bright, too bright for a moment, then steadied. "Doctor?" Haydock laughed softly. "Even your fires obey you, Jane." She smiled, but her eyes stayed on the flame. "Not mine, Doctor," she said. "They obey truth. It always finds a way to live again." The room grew still once more. Outside, the church bell stopped ringing, and for a breath of silence the whole of Street Mary Mead felt at peace. Then, faintly, from across the square, a window flickered with light. Not candlelight. Something sharper. Miss Marple looked up. Her teacup paused halfway to her lips. The faintest smile touched her face. "Ah," she whispered. "So it begins again. Thank you for joining us tonight, dear friends. Another quiet evening in Street Mary Mead. And yet, another shadow lifted. Which clue gave it away for you? The ring trapped in wax or the soot beneath the stove? Tell us below. Your guesses always surprise us. It's been quite the night candles that remembered secrets, a ledger that refused to stay silent, and one woman who thought guilt could be hidden in light. Miss Marple would say it best, no sin ever vanishes. It only changes form. And sometimes it flickers right back to life. If you listened till now, thank you for sharing your evening with us. Pour yourself another cup. Breathe in the quiet. And let your thoughts wander. What would you have done if the fire refused to die? Don't forget to leave your theory in the comments. Your clue might solve the next case. And of course, if you enjoyed tonight's mystery, tap like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves a slow burn puzzle. Because somewhere, in another quiet village, another candle is waiting to be lit. Until next time, may truth cool slower than tea. And somewhere, beyond the hills of Street Mary Mead, another story begins to stir. A letter waits on a doorstep. No stamp, no name. Only a single wax seal pressed deep with the mark of a crown. The housemaid found it before dawn. Frost clung to the envelope. The ink, when she touched it, was still wet. She looked around the empty lane. No footsteps. No bicycle. No one to claim it. When the postmaster arrived, he swore he'd made no such delivery, and yet the letter bore the village's own return address. Miss Marple, still seated by her window, watched the fog roll in over the hedgerows. She didn't know it yet, but the envelope would reach her table before the week's end. Inside it, a single line, written in an elegant, unfamiliar hand. The fire never truly went out. The kettle whistled softly in her kitchen. The village clock struck 9, and as the last chime faded into the snow, the wind slipped through the open letterbox, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke. Another mystery had found its way home, and this time, the spark waiting beneath the quiet would burn far longer than before.